Today, we're talking to Dylan Etkin, founder and CEO at Sleuth, about how CTOs can master metrics and move beyond dashboard graveyards. You're listening to Joel Beasley, Modern CTO.
It's been 300 or 400 episodes since we last got to spend some time together. What's changed since 2021? It's been about 3-4 years now.
Yeah. So many things have changed, right? Our economy has changed. I think last time we spoke, we were probably cowering in fear of COVID-19, so lots more in-person presence. I don't even know when we last spoke, there might have been a nascent space around what it is that we do with Sleuth. There's a thriving space around us now with lots of new competitors and old competitors and those sorts of things. And, I think like everybody in the software world, obviously the last year and a half, 2 years has just been a real shift in the amount of value that you need to provide in order to actually sell and, be impactful for organizations, just with all the layoffs and the reduction in funding and those sorts of things.
Help me understand something. So I talk to a lot of tech leaders. Everyone writes content, has conversations as if this engineering management metric thing isn't solved, as if it is an open problem. So I'm curious, will that get solved before AI replaces team members? Will we end up never actually solving that's just an unsolvable problem, or have you guys solved it and now it's just waiting for people to learn about the solution and adopt it and understand it?
That's a great question. I think that it's somewhere in between, right? I think all of these things are gray. I think it is far more solved today than it has ever been. I would say that it is far more solved today than it was when we last spoke. I don't know if it will ever be fully solved until perhaps the AI, takes over and sort of says, "Yeah, I'm fine." Right? I don't know. I hope that doesn't happen.
I got that question from I read your engineering blog. And you were talking about anti-patterns when implementing AI, and number one was replacing team members with AI. Have you been seeing people, you mentioned in the article a little bit about people jumping the gun? Have you seen that firsthand, or have you heard it through networks? Or I haven't personally met anyone who's mistakenly fired teams of people thinking AI is going to replace them. Have you?
Oh, interesting. I have a friend who works in the video game industry, and they let go of their entire concept artist team, and they're just using the AI tooling for that, which, if you think about it, kind of makes sense. They're not using the assets that come out of that in game. They're just saying, hey, what if it was a purple polka dotted hippopotamus, right? And, AI is good enough to get you into the realm of, all right, conceptually we like that and we want to move forward, or we don't. So, I don't know if in software dev, in what we're doing, I've seen a lot of that, but I think there's a lot of shifting going on.
Now I want to see a purple polka dotted hippopotamus.
And today we could just
type that in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can visualize. I've been doing that with my kids.
Yeah.
What was it? He wanted to see my son, my 5-year-old, wanted to see a monster truck made out of hamburgers.
There you go.
I just flipped open GPT and I said, show me this. And it was beautiful. It was a magnificent monster truck made out of hamburgers.
We have a really fun marketing campaign that we're running right now where we got a bunch of, influencers or folks that have exciting jobs as CTOs in the industry. And we have this idea of this just campaign where, somebody comes to you and asks, could you just do this thing? And it's kind of the tip of the iceberg. It's the ice cube that is the, hiding the iceberg below. And so we've collected stories from these folks, and then we kind of created an emoji of these individuals and then put that together on these billboards. But for the emojis, I'd say 85 to 90% of the heavy lifting was AI giving us, describing the individual and getting the emoji and getting the right positioning. And then the rest of the way was our designer, cleaning it up.
Are they on your website?
No, we're running them in SF right now, and then there'll be a run on the Nasdaq later in November, and then there'll be some in bus shelters around AWS reInvent in Vegas. But it's amazing how we all have the same stories, right? Like one of them was like just get more GPUs, right? Or just add autocomplete, or just add dark mode. And
you
there's
gotta
always a
get dark
punchline
mode
that comes along. Yeah, and I think our punchline for that one is 80% in 2 days. 3 months later we shipped the feature or something along those lines, right? Where it's just It seems simple. You just do it, right? And
change the style sheet.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think the thing that I love too is as an engineering leader, I have gone from being asked just questions to asking just questions, right? Like. As a startup founder, now I'm the one being like, can't we just do this thing? I'm sure I said, can't we just add AI? And they're like, we can, but come on, man.
Dylan, just add the button. Just add the button, like just a little checkbox on the page, and we're good.
Yep, exactly. Right.
And we're good. Yeah.
Just add a link in the header, and 12 months later in a UI rewrite. Sure.
Yeah, I built financial planning software for several years. And I did it alongside a non-technical financial planner, right? So he was a business guy, knew how to run that world. And we built the software to help his business. And I learned how to deal with just conversations really, really, really well, right? Because it's like if you're modeling someone's financial future, there is tens of thousands of variables that are going into these calculations. And if they're like, oh, just add this one like little change here, and that's gonna... It's got to work right. It's got to be tested, and you got to understand it. So, yeah, those. What have you learned with just conversations? What's the most important thing if somebody comes to you and they give you just dark mode, just GPU? How do you handle that?
I mean, the thing I love about this campaign for us is one of the big things that we're trying to give companies in terms of value is aligning engineering and business, and honestly, most of these just circumstances have to do with that alignment. So, when there is a misalignment between expectation or reality or allocations or who's going to work on what or what the potential value of that could be, I think that's when you get into these just situations where, there's just not enough alignment between the asker and the folks that understand it, or perhaps there's not enough of a realization that like it is a large ask, that it is an iceberg, not an ice cube that's being asked for. So really, I don't know if there's a one size fits all about what we've learned, but really at the end of the day, alignment is the key for all these sorts of things when you're trying to, do a better job with engineering and your business.
I learned a new term from you from the prep call. What are dashboard graveyards?
Dashboard graveyards.
I mean,
it's
those.
something. Yeah. I mean, it's something that we talk about. I think that we're all in tech a little bit addicted to dashboards. They make individuals that create them or the individual who tends to consume them feel really good about themselves. And, in certain circumstances, they can be wonderful. If I'm trying to debug an operational issue and I want to see real-time metrics of what's going on with my servers, a dashboard can help me get out of a whole lot of trouble. Now, the trouble in my mind is that we tend to over-rely on them. And you tell me if you've had this experience. Somebody creates a dashboard, they think it's the bee's knees, they think it's the answer to everything, and perhaps it's something that you're meant to consume. And then you go look at it, your interpretation of what's on that dashboard might be different than what that individual who sent it your way interprets it to be. It might be the case that some of that data has gotten stale at some point. So, what data can you believe? What data can't you believe? Is there a point in time that this was accurate? Is it accurate any longer? How am I meant to interpret it? And then what the hell am I even supposed to do with it? What's the point of it to exist? And so a dashboard graveyard, right, is kind of this like collection of dashboards where they're not impactful. You don't know what to do with them. They might be holding some very, very promising and exciting information, but how would you know? There's no interpretation. There's no shared understanding. And it's very often the case that you just don't know what to do next.
Another thing that I read about on your blog that really caught my attention was discussing why traditional meetings suck and drain your soul away. That's poetic.
I think that might have been my title. I was going for something a little grabby there, but it happens.
It worked. It was my favorite thing I read because not only was it written well, I completely identified with it. We've got 2 meetings a week at the company, and they're under 30 minutes, and 15 of those is socialization stuff. How'd your week go? Things like that. I don't like meetings. I find them, they're soul sucking. Yeah. So when you're building a product that helps have less meetings, does that make you feel like on mission, on purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. Or, I think better than have less meetings is have meetings that don't feel like your soul has been sucked away. Because, when you said that, I can relate completely. There are definitely some meetings where I dread it and I don't want to be a part of it. But I would say that sometimes the most fulfilling thing that I have done have done is been in some sort of meeting where you really just got through a lot of different things. There was a meeting of the minds. You came out aligned with other people, excited and enthusiastic about what you were going to do. You felt like something that would have taken you days or weeks offline was accomplished in an hour. And I think that's the thing that you want to do. You want to turn every meeting into one of those where you've gotten the drudgery and the details and the data and the interpretation of that stuff kind of out of the way before you get into the meeting. And then you get into the meeting and you just hit the ground running.
And so when you meet new CTOs, how do you describe what you do? Because in some ways you were describing it as you turn meetings into reviews. There was a couple different ways you guys have described it. How do you describe it when you meet a CTO and they ask, "Oh, what does Sleuth do?"
I mean, for a CTO, I think the easiest way to understand is just that you're going to help them align business and engineering. So every CTO I've ever met recognizes that is their job, right? Like they are in charge of building a world-class engineering organization, but at the end of the day, they're the one that has the understanding that business is a driver and that business has needs and that engineering is there to facilitate these things, right? And to work in concert and to work together with the business to accomplish the things that they need to do. So I don't usually start with meetings just because I think, that pigeonholes you, but that the concepts of how are you going about understanding how well you are aligned with the engineering efforts that you are undertaking, how well aligned are they to business, and how do you prove that? Do you have data around that, or is that more of a gut feeling? Because for most CTOs, I would say nowadays, there's some form of data, but for the most part, it's one of these chain of gut checks, right? Where it's I have a really good gut over years. That's why I've been hired into a CTO role. I also hire well. All the people that work under me have great guts as well. And then we sort of run that all the way down through the org. So we have a gut feel of how things are going and how well we are aligned versus, using quantifiable data to inform those things.
Can you give me a specific example of how you actually do this? You go into a company that doesn't have this in place. How does this actually play out?
Yeah, I mean, probably the easiest example would just be surfacing effort, right? So how many full-time employees are working on the different initiatives that you have? So capturing those initiatives, maybe it's as Jira Epics or however it is that an organization is capturing the things that they are working on at any given time, and then showing the amount of effort that is going into each one of those things. And then, further breaking that down by how much of that effort is new feature work versus keeping the lights on, or doing support work, or, those technical debt and those sorts of things, and just giving a really clear data-driven understanding of where are we spending our time? Where did we think we were spending our time? Where should we be spending our time? And do those match?
Yeah. So, but when you meet these clients, right, how you see the market because you're actually implementing the software and working with them, how many of these companies just like broad gut feel, right? How many of these companies have that initial categorization that's actually tied to business outcomes versus feature sets or, listing as it's tied to apps? Like how many people have their Epic set up or whatever system they're using and it's already set up connected to business value versus how many people do you have to like help teach and shape to better understand how to do that? I mean, I know that there's people that, they know they need to do it and they might be doing it in some other organizational way, right? Like in some plan, some 90-day roadmap or whatever, they might be doing it there. But how many people have data that's already orchestrated or collected by business outcome?
I mean, I think it's what you said last, which is that they tend to have the pieces of it laying around. It's rarely the case that we meet folks that have nothing. Although actually we just spoke with some folks just the other day, so I'm contradicting myself. In their words, they had their ass handed to them by the board, right? And the board basically was like, look, we can assume that you're doing something, but from our perspective, it looks like you're not really doing anything. So you need to at least have some form of metrics that tells us what you're doing, and when I was doing an exec alignment call with them, they had come to us and said, look, we just want to start with DORA metrics. And it was because the board was like, you need to put something in place. And they're like, we need to go back to the board and just show that we put something in place. And that's when I kind of stopped them and went, well, what if we could give you a board appropriate level of metrics that talks about the progress of the things that you're doing based off of that real work? With that, how would that go down? And they were like, oh my God, that would be incredible, right? Like that's what we need. We need to show them that like, this investment is paying off. We were doing work, but they struggled to surface that today. But I'd say most organizations are somewhere in between, where they have a sense of what they're working on. Maybe they have some sort of OKR system. The two are separate, like they don't necessarily tie them together. A lot of folks do this very manually. A lot of the CTOs I've spoken to, they have a process in place. They have a meeting and like somebody's using like Google Slides, and they're tasking individuals to go off and get all sorts of data, pull that data across the organization. Sometimes that can take anywhere between, hours to days and even potentially weeks. And they're doing it on a quarterly basis and they're, running through these things. But again, I think it tends to not have all the data that they need. It's very, very manual to collect it. It's a one-off thing. There's not necessarily a shared interpretation of what that data means, right? There's so many different ways to improve that process.
And you're the founder of the company, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Co-founder.
And so it's co-founder. So you like helping people. You like solving problems and helping people, right? I'm serious. That's a core requirement of like founders. Like they want to be useful to other people.
Yeah.
You can find in ICs people who are just really excited about like a specific problem, but in the founder world, you find that. So who are like, I don't know if you can share any clients or any stories, but like what's been the most, it doesn't have to be a big name or whatever, but what's the most rewarding client that like when you started working with them and you brought them like tremendous value and they just became huge fans of you and you really enjoyed them. Do you have any stories like that?
We worked with this one customer. I don't know if I'll share their name, but we kind of like connected with this individual who was an engineering manager, who is really heavily using the DORA side of what we do. And it was one of those instances where, I obviously have a pretty good sense of what our product does and how to use it. If I didn't, that might be a problem. But this was one of those instances where, after watching the way that he was utilizing the product, I was kind of surprised, and I was like, oh man, that's very cool. And he was even like, able to take feature gaps that we had and bridge them himself to sort of make different connections and then use the raw data and sort of like, do the manual part that should have probably been in the product anyway, to make a difference for his team. And, it was just really rewarding because I think it came to us in saying like, they've 3x'd their metrics across the board, and are like really enjoying like, it's driving their weekly meetings where they're like getting in there and actually using this information. And, the story was so exciting that, we asked and they allowed us to sort of sit in as a fly on the wall in one of those meetings, and just like watching how they were using it was super cool. And it drove a number of features that we ended up building, because we're like, that looked painful. You shouldn't have to do that. Like, let's go ahead and just automate that for you and encapsulate in the product what it is that you've discovered.
Did you have any engineers or anybody else with you in that meeting to watch?
Yeah, I mean, we had the product. I think we had my CTO and a product guy as well.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah,
nice. So, what's the reason why people buy this from you? Why do they come and they become a customer of Sleuth? What's their pain point that they're experiencing? And they're like, "Hey, Dylan, I've got this pain. I need your product. What is that?"
I mean, it can come from a number of different angles. Interestingly enough, it's that story that I just told where an organization feels like they don't have metrics. They feel like they're flying by the seat of their pants. And that tends to be a discovery process where they go off and they look and they go, what metrics could we be using? Often they're going to fall on something like Dora metrics. But it's in that case, it tends to be an educational thing where they come to us saying, I just want metrics. And then we have to push them and say, what does that mean? Like there's something behind that. Again, in this case, the board handed their ass to them. And like, it's about communication. It's about upwards communication. It's about communication at each level. It's about really knowing what is the actual work that's being done so that you can make a decision and change the outcome, right? Like, but teasing that out with those folks, like it tends to their initial idea is like, I just need a metrics program. But the answer is that's never the answer, right? There's something else that's driving that. Sometimes you also will get like the sort of financial side of things where they're like, I want to understand allocations. We have to do, we get tax credits from the government around the R&D work that we do. So like, I want to understand capitalization and, like if you can, from the systems that we're already using today without very much effort, understand like, which parts are R&D and which parts of our development work don't fall into R&D. And we have an auditable way of showing that, like a CFO can be quite interested in that sort of information too.
Yeah, 100%. Right.
Yeah.
You got to get those R&D tax credits.
I mean, if all my developers were in Australia, I would care a lot about that too.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So did you have Pulse last time that your Pulse product, did you have that a couple years ago or is that brand new?
Yeah. Pulse is brand new. Pulse is one of the things that, we've learned a lot in the last 5 years. And I would say the things that we learned that drove us to Pulse were that Dora metrics are not enough. Dora metrics are really great at telling you where your bottlenecks are. They're not great on telling you if things are on time. They're not great at telling you whether you're working on the right thing. They're not even great at telling you whether the people that you're working for you are happy or unhappy while doing it. So
how do you tell that?
Oh, that gets into the whole DevX surveys and, the mixture between quantitative and qualitative information, which I think is super interesting. Like when we started this journey, I'm like, I never want a Google Calendar plugin. I might have changed my mind. I think there's something to that, right? Like it's the mixture. I want hard data, but I also want a little bit of soft, fuzzy data in there too.
So you do dev surveys?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we do DevX surveys. We'll run those out through Slack or Microsoft Teams or whatever it is that your team is relying on to do those sorts of things. And we'll let you like mix that in, like I say, with the harder metrics, like some Dora metrics or allocations or an understanding of what's on track or what's not on track.
Do you offer that as like a self-serve standalone? Like I can just go on there and do DevX surveys, or does it?
Yeah,
have to be like?
No, I think what tends to happen, we're trying to provide an operating system for engineering, right? Because there's a lot of different personas in an engineering organization and it all rolls up. It's all sort of tied together. But the reality of adopting something like that is that you're going to have a primary pain and we want you to be able to solve that primary pain, understand that there's value there, and then sort of expand that out. So if your primary pain is, I don't have good DevX surveys, you can pop into Pulse and with very little integrations, obviously just connecting up like a chat integration, you can be running DevX surveys and get that information. You don't have to do the whole allocations piece or the DORA piece or any of those sorts of things. And, similarly, you can do the others. You can adopt those.
Is it self-serve or do I have to talk to sales?
With Pulse, we're talking to sales.
Okay.
Because I guess, quite honestly, what we've learned is that when we do the self-serve side of things, it can go wrong. If we've learned a lot about how to help organizations put in a successful metrics program and how to use them in such a way that they can change their outcomes. Mm-hmm. And that has a lot to do with top-down buy-in. So like leadership needs to be bought into this sort of thing. There needs to be an understanding of like how you're going to roll it out, what you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to achieve. And like I said, even in our market, a lot of these organizations, the impetus is not fully thought out on their part, right? They're like, I need metrics. And you're like, which metrics and why? Like, what's the real thing behind this? Because that in itself is not a goal. If I get you the best metrics in the world, nothing's going to change.
I get that every day with the podcast production company. They'll say, we need a podcast. It's like, well, why?
Right.
Why do you need a podcast? Like, what is this, an internal podcast? Do you want to be famous? Do you want business relationships? Do you want lead? Like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure
hard.
you find that they know the answer to that question. You just have to sit down with them and tease it out. Right. And that's the case for us as well, is they know what's going on inside of their own organization. They know what will have the biggest impact. But if we don't have an opportunity to sit down and tease it out, then they kind of go, I got a dashboard, and, dashboards probably belong in the graveyard. And they'll be like, well, this didn't change my life.
Yeah, no, I 100% understand. Actually, it's one of the harder things about scaling that up with sales, right? That ability to really deeply understand it, to be able to sit with the client, understand their needs, and then share your product in the context of their needs.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How have you done that?
I mean, it's probably just learning over time,
Are you the number one salesperson there?
I am involved in a lot of the sales process for sure. I play a more useful role, which is the exec alignment role in the sales process, because I've got great people working for me. They're really good at demoing the product. They're really good at connecting and sort of taking things through a sales process, collecting those needs and, getting POCs set up. But the place where I can add value is connecting with the CTO, right? Like, cause I have a similar background and just can provide that sense of like, look, here's what we're trying to accomplish as an organization. Like, and let's make sure that we're aligned. Like, this is what we're building towards. This is like the value that we can give you today. This is where we're focusing our value tomorrow, and where are you at? Like, what are you trying to accomplish with your organization? Why are you trying to put this in place? What would a win look like for you? Like, are you just trying to empower your engineering managers? We can do that. Are you trying to empower your developers? We can do that. Are we trying to talk at the exec level with data? Because we can do that too. But like, what's important for you? Mm-hmm. And that can be an easier conversation, like with myself and that kind of individual.
So just run me through your products real quick. There's Pulse. And what else?
I don't like to think of them as separate.
They're not separate? Okay.
Well, I mean, so if you're buying Sleuth, you're buying an enterprise solution that is basically the whole thing. But like, there are areas of concentration. So we have basically like a deep dive DORA where it's like very, very configurable. It like handles like every crazy workflow you've ever thought you might want to do. It's very flexible in terms of like failure rate and the different systems that you might use for that as well. Then we also have an automations marketplace. So for a lot of the bottlenecks that we discover at that smaller level, where we say, hey, your review lag time is taking too long, or, you have too many incidents, or, whatever it is, there's a lot of things that you can solve through automation, right? Mm-hmm. So for instance, review lag time is a great one, where you can set a goal and say, I want to have a review done within 12 hours, and if you agree as a team to do that, well, heck, robots can jump into action and see who's on a review. They're connected up to Slack. They can say, oh, at the 75% mark, I'm going to go ahead and ping you and remind you that you had this agreement to get this thing done. I'm going to let you know when it's over the time, and in that way, in that you're like getting in the face of people, you can kind of automate your way to better with those sorts of things. So there's a whole automation piece that adds a lot of those things. And then there's the operationalization, which is kind of the way that we think of Pulse. So, that's the other thing that we've learned in the last 5 years is we've had companies that are very successful. They have their metrics in place. And then the question becomes, how do we use these? Like, what do we do next? Like, what are we supposed to do with this? And so Pulse is really meant to have those more expanded metrics and then also answer the question of how am I actually supposed to use this? How would I operationalize putting this program in place?
And as far as we were talking earlier about like engineering and review meetings, do you have any good examples or stories of like specifically how you make those meetings better?
Yeah. So, the Pulse product is all around that. That's the secret sauce. It's not that secret really, right? Which is like, we asked ourselves, what is a commonality amongst most organizations? And it's meetings, for good or for bad, right? Like, and I always refer to them as rituals. Organizations have certain rituals. There are some pretty common ones, right? Like a sprint review. Most organizations are going to have something like that, or an operations review, or, I would get together when I ran status page at Atlassian with my engineering leads. And every 2 weeks, we would just talk about engineering as a whole, right? How is it going? Like an engineering review, or like I was describing earlier, an exec level review where you're talking about, hey, we hired 30 people. Where are we going to allocate those people? Where are our allocations today? Are they the right things? Like this is the OKR of the company. That's number one. Is there anything standing in the way of that? Whether that's called like a CTO review or an exec review or whatever. Organizations have these things in place. Now, whether they are doing them effectively or not, whether they are bringing data to the table or not, whether they are bringing a shared understanding to these meetings before the meeting, or they're trying to like come to that shared understanding within the meeting, it varies quite wildly. But each one of those are an example where in Pulse, we say, we understand what best practices are in terms of the data that you would want to bring to this meeting. We can glean that data automatically for you. And then we can provide the platform that's going to allow you that collaboration to capture the shared understanding so that you can then drive changed outcomes, and attach those outcomes to the data and all of that sort of stuff as well.
Oh man, this is good. Wait, hey, you have kids, correct?
I do, but they're old.
They're old? What do you mean they're old? You're like 40, right?
No, man, I'm like 50 and
get out of here.
Yeah.
You my daughter's, good. Thanks. You look good.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Daughter's turned 22. My son's 20.
My goodness. Oh my goodness.
She graduated college. It's crazy.
What was she interested in?
Video games, video game design.
Oh, tell her you don't want to go to that one area of gaming. They just all got laid off. Your buddies. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, like that's in general, the gaming market is in a rough place right now. It's not a great time to, I think, to be trying to get a job in there, but
it might be a good time to start be creator in there, right? Because I've been seeing all the improvements to the tools. Now what used to take a team of 200 people can be done by a couple people.
Yeah, it is incredible. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And the distribution platforms, her and a couple friends are building this game and they're just like, it's up on Steam. And you're like, yeah, cool. All right. So people can just pay you for that. That's great.
Dude, I can't believe you're 50. That's ridiculous.
Thanks. Neither can I.
Yeah, you got a good do you feel much different? So I'm 36 for context. Do you feel much different at 50 than 36?
Yes.
How so?
Oof. I don't know. There's just a big distance. Well, probably the kids, right? Like when I was your age, my kids were tiny and that was like everything was, Saturday soccers and all that sort of stuff. But I don't know. I just, in theory, you're trying to learn all the time and you're trying to grow as an individual, and certainly in the last 14 years, I feel like I've done a lot of growth, I think 14 years ago, I was likely, I don't know, like a team lead or maybe like an EM on a small product somewhere, and just probably much more of that the thing that you were saying earlier, right? As a founder, I'm looking to help people. Probably 14 years ago, I was a little more of that IC where I was just looking to build cool stuff, you know? So I don't know.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just different stages, different personality types. Yeah.
I think as you grow older, your interests grow a little wider, and, you see a thing and you go, I can do that. That sounds interesting. Let me get good at that,
When did you start to understand that's in the past 10 years. So from 26 to 36, my IQ on understanding the passage of time has increased, and it sounds ambiguous. I don't know how to be more specific, but I just understand how time passes better.
Yeah, for sure. And what you can and can't accomplish, and what you'd like to accomplish, and, setting those goals for yourself. I mean, similar to the product that we're building, right?
Right.
If you don't have some sort of measures, how do you get better?
Oh one of the quotes that stuck with me quite a bit in this past 10 years has been, you can do anything, but you can't do everything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, gosh. You really can. You can choose something and set your stake in the ground and say, this it's immovable. I'm going to make this happen. But of all the millions of billions of things you could do, you can only really do that with maybe 2 or 3 things in life. Right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for talking about the family stuff with me. I always like to include the human side of things, and it helps me better understand people. And it's crazy because last time we talked, your kids were in high school, and now they're in college. And
I know. Yeah,
time goes by. Yeah, maybe next time we talk, we'll do another one in 3 years, and then they'll be married. One of them will be married.
Oh my God. Yeah, I don't even think about that. But yes, that's a possibility.
So as we start to wrap up, let's say we've got some CTOs listening who are interested in exploring whether it's the Dora or the Pulse, and they want to get some metrics around what's going on in engineering. How do they start their journey? Where do they go to learn more? What's the next step?
I mean, sleuth.io, there's a little talk to us button, jump on a call with us. We'll spend 30 minutes, find out a little bit about what's going on with you, talk to you about what we can and can't do. Honestly, like we said here, I mean, yes, we want to sell things, but our goal is to help organizations. There's nothing more rewarding than taking a problem that somebody has and making it a non-problem and giving them a solution. So, come talk to us and let's see if we can help.
There it is, sleuth.io. There will be a link in the notes. Dylan, thank you. We made a podcast. Thank you for doing this. How do you feel?
There you go. Yeah, no, it's great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you found this episode useful, please share it with a friend or a colleague who you think would get value from it. And if you have topics that you'd like to hear discussed on the podcast, either add me on LinkedIn or send me an email, joel@moderncto.io. Every time I get an email or LinkedIn message, it absolutely makes my day and inspires me to keep going.